In today's lecture, we will be studying architectural principles. What are the architectural principles that are applicable to any architectural system? So there are two words here now. There is an architectural system and there are architectural principles. Now, when we say architectural system, what do we mean? We all know what a system is. System is something in which you have an input and you have an output. One of the definitions of a system is this. So you have open systems and closed systems. So architecture, when you say architecture is also a system, you have certain things that you give to the structure and there are certain outcomes of that. Now, in an architectural system, you would always have uh, the different principles of an architectural system. Now, what are those principles of an architectural system? What does a principle mean? A principle means you could say a law or a regulation or an order. So this would be a principle of an architectural system. So every architectural system would have a definite order or a regulation or a law which governs it. Now what does so इसका ये मतलब है कि एक architectural system है, it's governed by certain laws and orders or regulations, and then in that system we are getting an, an outcome from certain inputs that we are applying to that system. I'd like to show to you a graph, a figure of what an architectural system would have. Now, is this visible? Is any one of you? You have an architectural system. Is this visible?
Yes, sir.
The architecture has got a space, a structure, and an enclosure. What does this mean? Now, these are very important things. Architecture has got a space, structure, and enclosure. A space, you all know, is an area or it's a volume. It could be an area or it could be a volume. So what does a structure? It would have a surface. So there would be a surface. And then there is an enclosure. There is a portion which is inside, enclosed within that structural space. So the space would mean both, जो उसकी दीवारें होंगी और जो अंदर वाला पोर्शन है, the whole area that it is taking and the whole volume of the building or the structure would be the space of that architectural system. Structure would be जो उसकी body है, जो उसका surface है, that is the structure of the architectural system. And enclosure is जो उसके अंदर की space है. The space within that system is, which is again uh, that can be classified as area or that can be classified as volume. So it would have an organizational pattern, relationship, clarity, hierarchy, formal image, spatial definition, qualities of shape, color, texture, scale, and proportion, qualities of surface, edges, and openings. Now, these would be the features of space, structure, and enclosure. That is, it would have a pattern, it would have relationships between different these spaces and between the enclosures. It would have clarity when you move from one space or one enclosure to other, and it would have hierarchy. That's how does one step go over the other. Like you have different floors or you have different levels in a structural system, so different stories, so they are placed as in hierarchy over one another in a particular form. For example, you have the towers, different towers. You have, when you say Burj Khalifa, you have a triangular shape, so it goes up in a triangular formation towards the top. Similar is when you have a look at the Petronas towers, they are rectangular cubical forms one over the other. So that's hierarchy. Formal image and spatial definition. So what is it? What does it picturize as? And when you look through different fields, there are different fields from where you are looking at. What is the spatial definition? So we'll go into these. What are the qualities of shape, color, texture, scale, and proportion? You understand all of these. उसकी shape कैसी है, उसका color and texture, and जो उसमें different textures हो सकते हैं, rough, smooth, and others. Scale, there are different scales on which that architectural system is and evolved. And then finally you have proportion. How uh, big is the proportion of that structure? What is the aspect ratio of that structure? Uh, is the breadth more or is the height more? So, what is the aspect ratio between these? That is proportioning. Scale is with respect to the background as well. उसके पीछे buildings और कौन सी है? So, then qualities of surfaces, edges and openings. So they also define the architectural system. Openings उसमें जो windows and doors के लिए हैं, उन उन वो कैसी है? आर्च शेप्ड है, रेक्टेंगुलर है, उन उनका साइज एंड एस्पेक्ट रेशियो कितना है? एंड सिमिलरली एज, हाउ इज द एज डिफाइंड? क्या वो प्रिडोमिनेंट है, क्या वो हिडन है? तो आर्किटेक्चरल सिस्टम में ये सारी चीजें बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. एंड देन सर्फेसेस, what is the overall quality? How are you um, framing up that surface? So when you say, and these are the three things: to space, structure, and enclosure, which form the architectural system. Now they are, when it's the second step comes, how is it experienced? It's experienced through movement in space and time. Means जब आप उस स्ट्रक्चर में, when you move into that structure, आप अपने घर में जाते हो, you go from the door, the outer door, then into the inner door, then you move over the floors, and finally towards the top of the attic. So you're experiencing how that structure looks like right from outside till inside. And then when you reach the top and then you have a look from top towards the garden or towards the road, so you are experiencing by movement in space with time. So it's like if you are making a videography, how does that architectural system look like when you are making a videography by motion through that structure? So there will be an approach and entry path through which you are moving, configuration, access, sequence of spaces. So when you are moving inside from outside, how do the spaces translate into one another? उसका ये मतलब है एक स्पेस दूसरे स्पेस में कैसे, and how does it fit when you're looking at it? So there are things which are very important. Light. So when you are moving inside, you will experience a change in the light. तो बाहर light बहुत होगी, तो how much light is there inside? Is it artificial? Is it natural? View, फिर अंदर से बाहर का व्यू कैसे और बाहर से अंदर का व्यू कैसे है? Touch, how do you feel the surfaces? Hearing, you just want to uh, pretend कि ये इसमें आप आवाज दे रहे हो तो इको तो नहीं हो रही है. So there are and how does it feel in hearing within that structure? क्या उसके acoustic सही है कि उसमें sound absorb हो रही है? A structure would not be good if it has echoes. And smell, how does it feel inside the structure? So it's actually the sensations of that structure. How does it feel? So a structure system, an architectural system, now has three inputs that were space, enclosure, structure, and enclosure, and you have output is what you feel in that structure, and what do you feel through your sensory organs, which is touch, hearing, eyes. These are the sensory organs, the main ones, and the hand. So, how do you feel when when you move through your legs into the path? Is the moving in through the with the help of the legs? So these are the outcomes. So architectural system has got input of space, structure, and enclosure, and experience is the outcome. What do you feel from all these systems? Now, how is that achieved? How is this architectural system achieved? ये हम कैसे पॉसिबल करते हैं कि ये स्ट्रक्चर बन जाए जो मैं चाहता हूं इसका आउटकम निकले? तो वो उसके लिए टेक्नोलॉजी चाहिए. सो एवरी कंप्यूटर हैज गॉट एन इनपुट, इट्स अ सिस्टम. उसमें इनपुट है एंड यू गेट एन आउटपुट, यू ऑलरेडी नो दैट. सो इट देयर इज अ टेक्नोलॉजी विद इन दैट. सो the technology is the structure, and the enclosure itself is the technology. The environmental protection and comfort, health, safety, welfare, durability, and sustainability. So that has to do with materials. What materials are you using in your technology? So how are you combining those materials? What is the machinery? What is the human effort that is involved in and combining those materials? And you then also have to take into care now the materials that you are using, are they sustainable materials, durable materials, all those things. So finally, that technology itself that you are getting is the structure and the enclosure. That itself is a technology as well. The structure and the enclosure itself becomes the technology, and it is this technology is offering you the environmental protection and the comfort at the same time, and the health, safety, and welfare within that structure. So that is the motive of this. So next, I you have now, how do you get that technology? This is through accommodating a program, which is user requirements. Now, what are we accommodating in that structural system? हम उसमें क्या क्या फैक्टर्स रखते हैं? एक तो है what is the user requirement. तो पहली चीज जब आप किसी भी client से, an architect asks, this is a simple example, he asks what is the requirement, what are his needs, and what are his aspirations. Then you need to take into account the socio cultural factors. Now, uh, do you have a separation of areas in the socio-cultural factor, or there is no separation of areas? And there are certain systems where you have an open lobby, and then you have a kitchen within the lobby, even a dining area within the lobby. Are you accommodating that within your system? or is that not in your socio cultural factor? So this is one of the examples. And then economic factors. What are the economic factors? तो पैसा बहुत important है. Is it low budget, high budget? So you need to take into that into account. Legal constraints. Now there may be bylaws. First of all, the height of the building may be restricted due to the legal constraints. So there are bylaws, 10 feet, for example, we have here minimum you need to provide for separating from the uh, your boundary wall itself, your boundary wall. And when you have a look into the structures that were provided earlier on in our own localities, when I go to the downtown area, for example, of the Srinagar city, and you will see that the structures are all placed on the road. But today you have bylaws, you cannot place the structures on the road. You need to have a minimum gap from the road as per the bylaws. So there are legal constraints in the height, in the structural dimensions, in the bylaws. There are legal constraints. Even in your own area, you cannot place over a particular area more than that area. Now there are legal constraints even for you need to provide a parking within your uh, this built up area, your within your plinth area, and your parking has to be a part of your build up area. Now you have to under another legal constraint. Probably this has been, I don't know whether this has been vetted or not, but it was in the news that you have to provide a kitchen garden as well. So you have to be ecologically sound as well within your area. That is your within your boundary wall. So these are the legal constraints. So that dictates your architectural system. Historic traditions and precedents. Now, what have been the traditions in that area, and what are the precedents of that? So the tradition, for example, in our area has been that we usually construct 3-story buildings in our area, although you can go even up till 4 stories, but we usually go to 2 or 3 story buildings. That has been our. So then you even into take into account the what has been, we usually place a plinth. Now there are areas even in high uh, high water table where you do not provide a plinth. So you accommodate things which are in your historical tradition. Now certain historical traditions you might accommodate, like you have arts and others. And even the Daji Diwali system, but it's up to the architect whether he's accommodating those precedents and traditions. Then comes the compatibility. Is it compatible with its context? This is very important. Is it compatible with its site and environment? Now there is a site which is in a uh, hilly area. There is the background is, it's, I showed you this before, a jungle. And is it accommodating with that the structure that you're making? If for example you make a 5-story 10-story building in at the top of a hill, and it's a concrete structure, and there is a wooden jungle behind it, green forestation behind it, it does not accommodate with that. So you want to accommodate the type of structure, its architecture with its site and environment behind it, beside it, in front of it. For example, in a city, you have, and in an urban area, the houses may be close. Now, how are you accommodating that structure within that framework where the structures are close enough? There are little spaces in between. How are you fitting within that environment? That's very important. Then comes the climate, sun, wind, temperature, and precipitation. सन कहाँ से राइज करता है? ईस्ट से. सेट कहाँ से होता है? वेस्ट से. विंड की डायरेक्शन कहाँ से चलती है? नाउ Mostly, what is the temperature of that area? That is very important. And how much is the rainfall that's happening in that area? Now, all these things you need to accommodate within your structure. For example, I'm just giving you one example. Your kitchen side has to be on side of the east, the rising sun, where early morning you work in the kitchen mostly, and the rising sun early in the morning takes out the foul smell from the kitchen. So it has to be towards the eastern side where the sun is rising in the morning. So this is one of the examples. Geography, soils, topography, vegetation, and water. Very important, all of these. किस टाइप की soil है? That is very important. Topography is what is the contouring profile of that area? Very important. उसमें is it gradient, slopy gradient? Is it plane? Very important. You have to accordingly make up the structure. Vegetation क्या है? And how much is the floral mass around that structure? And is there water around the structure? Sensory and cultural characteristics of the place. You have to even take into account these cultural characteristics and the sensory characteristics of that place. Uh, Under these contexts, you have to you have to be very uh, this has to be what's the term? You have to be sensitive for these sensory and cultural characteristics of that place. तो उस space में वहां पर उस place में cultural pattern now, which I have already discussed, the physical characteristics of this architectural system. Now, what these are the orders of an architectural system now. These are known as so the architectural system would have orders. Now, what are the orders? The physical form, the form and space. So solids and voids, interior and exterior. What does this mean? You have a structure which has got a solid body. How much is the solid mass in that, and how much is are the voids? How much are the openings? At which place are the openings? Now, from interior, how is the form and the space, and from exterior, how is the form and the space? I have already discussed this, the form and the space. Now, the systems and organizations of space, structure, enclosure, and machine. So, space, structure, and enclosure are your architectural systems. They are the inputs of your architectural system, and machine is the technology that you have used. So, how do you organize this? जब आप इसको organize करना चाहते हो, एक order में डालना चाहते हो, space को, structure को और enclosure को, they will have two main things, the solids and the voids, and how does it look from interior and exterior. So these three things, जब हम उनको organize करते हैं in particular forms, you get the form, and you then ultimately get a space inside it. So then you have a perceptual recognition of what is that space, what is that form, and what is that space. Now, what does this mean? जब हम एक स्ट्रक्चर को अब एक ऑर्डर एंड शेप में एक डालते हैं, तो उसका एक फॉर्म एंड स्पेस हमें निकलता है. नाउ दैट फॉर्म एंड स्पेस जो मैंने कुछ ब्रीफली डिस्क्राइब किया, सो फ्रॉम द हिस्टोरिकल पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू कि फॉर्म एंड स्पेस क्या होता है, तो वो आप कैसे उसको रिकॉग्नाइज करते हो. आप उन डिफरेंट एलिमेंट्स को आप कैसे आपस में रिकॉग्नाइज, तो आपने उनको ऑर्डर में रख दिया, पर्टिकुलर ऑर्डर. आपने पहले एक रेक्टेंगुलर क्यूबिकल जो मैंने पहले डिस्कस किया था, उसके ऊपर मैंने एक और क्यूबाइड डाल दिया, या उसके ऊपर मैंने डोम डाल दिया. सो मैंने ऑर्गेनाइजेशन उसकी अचीव कर ली. लेकिन हाउ डज इट रिकॉग्नाइज विद द, जब आप उन डिफरेंट एलिमेंट्स को आपस में जोड़ते हो, तो वो कैसे आपस में रिकॉग्नाइज करते हैं? तो वो वैसे ही पता चलता है जब मैंने आपको कहा कि यू मूव थ्रू द स्ट्रक्चर, यू आर You have the outcomes. That is, the outcome was you're moving through the space and time of that structure. जो अभी मैंने कहा, so you are actually traveling through the structure. So it's giving you the recognition, the sensory perception, and the recognition of the physical elements when you are moving through that space sequentially in time. So approach and departure, जब आप लेते हो within that structure. So what is the perceptual sensory perception that you are getting? The entry and the egress, the movement through the order of the spaces. तो जब आप एक स्पेस से दूसरे स्पेस में, एक कमरे से दूसरे कमरे में जाते हो, तो हाउ डज इट लुक लाइक? इट्स नॉट ऑलवेज कि आप एक कमरे से दूसरे कमरे में जाते हो. देयर आर स्पेसेस वेयर यू आर एक्चुअली मूविंग ओवर लेवल्स. तो फॉर एग्जांपल, यू हैव किचन at the bottom, you have it's going down, you have a lobby around it or a dining area around it, and it's at a higher level, just 2 or 3 steps higher. And then you have, so it could be a space, उसमें एक लेवल भी हो सकता है, उसमें स्टोरीज भी हो सकता है. उस लेवल में आप एक स्पेस में आपको ऑर्डर बिटवीन different rooms भी हो सकता है. Those are the spaces as well. So you're moving through order of the spaces, functioning and the activities within the space. ये important है now. Now you have a kitchen where you are uh, using it for cooking purposes, or for cooking and sitting purposes, or for cooking and dining purposes. You have, accordingly, you form that space. Do you want that space for sitting purpose as well, or just as kitchen? So our conception is, when you are framing a kitchen, for example, here I'll just give you an example. So this is very important for all of you to understand. hum if you have a modular kitchen, now you have a chimney space, you always have a sink space within your kitchen. Now, do you require space for crockery within your kitchen? If you have a huge amount of crockery, or you don't have a crockery at all but you want to purchase it later, and you want to keep a space for that. Now, in every modular kitchen today, you have defined sets and procedures कि आपको यहाँ पर ये स्पेस ये वाले बर्तन के लिए रखनी है, और ये वाली स्पेस ऊपर वाली आपको किसी और बर्तन के लिए रखनी है. सो दो स्पेसेस आर नाउ डिफाइंड. नाउ दैट इज एक्चुअली डन कि हमारी स्पेस रेस्ट्रिक्शंस, ये स्पेस में हम किचन और बड़ा कर देते थे. नाउ दैट कैन बी रिस्ट्रिक्टेड इन अ मॉड्यूलर स्पेस जिसमें अलग अलग खाने बने हुए हैं. तो स्पेस यूटिलाइज हो रही है पूरी तरह से. Now, how much are you utilizing that space? That is very important. Are you using that space even for a refrigerator? Are you using kitchen even for, do you require a dishwasher as well? So your requirements can keep on increasing. Are you using a double door refrigerator? Are you are you using two double door refrigerators? Are you using a single door refrigerator? तो उसकी स्पेस बढ़ रही है. Now in the modern kitchens, you also need a space for where you need a water purification system. Now there are water purification systems of different orders, from a simple one to a complicated UV based, RO based system. How much is the capacity that you want for that? So that is defining your space, but you want to put that space in a proper order. You do not want, now kitchen is a good example for that, because it you are using it for a functional area, and the activities there are most. उतनी एक्टिविटी किसी और एरिया में नहीं होती है जितनी किचन में होती है. एक स्ट्रक्चरल स्पेस, एक बिल्डिंग अगर हो, तो your counters would be defined by the number of people living in your house. So if you are 15 members in living in a house, your counter area has to be more, so your kitchen space has to be more. So that is actually defining your. Now if there are two people living in a house, or just a single person living in a house, you do not want to have a large counter area. There is no requirement of that. So your counter area is the number of people living on in your house. Next comes the this was about the functioning of the spaces. I can go on with the other spaces, but we'll go to them individually. Qualities of light, color, texture, view, and sound. So this is what the sensory uh, perception is actually of. How does the light look of? What is the color, texture when you feel it? How do you view the out exteriors and the interiors, and what is the sound quality within? So not only is there a problem of acoustics of echo, there is a problem also of you do not want the sound of one room to go into the other room. So if there is somebody sitting in one room and he has a television on, and there should not be sound traveling into the other room, and so with the television on, and that sound coming into the other room. Similarly, the sound from the exteriors. What is the sound that you want to hear from the exterior? There, you are living near a road. You do not want to hear the sound of beep beep from the cars. You just want to hear the sound of the birds in the early morning. So then how are you actually insulating your structure from the sounds? So it has to do something with the insulation of as well, sound insulation, and that has to do something else with the thermal insulation as well, on which area I am myself personally working on, the thermal insulation. And it has to do also with the um, then with the types of materials that you are using in your walls. So you will all rejoin, the session is closing.